times since I retired, and prior to retirement I was in Morocco 3 or 4 times. So why on earth would I be in Morocco so many times? But of course, as has been mentioned, I was once a geography teacher. So we have to have a map, and we also have to have some statistics. And as you can see from the data sheet in front of you there, you can compare Morocco with Scotland. I won't go through it line by line, obviously, but in terms of area, obviously Morocco is considerably larger than Scotland. Its population is times, well, work it out, times 6, a fairly similar population density, and surprisingly enough, it's got a wealth considerably less than that of the UK. It's a poor-ish country with a fraction of the per capita wealth that we experience in Scotland. These figures, of course, are pre-COVID. Here's an interesting statistic. Life expectancy for a male in the capital of Rabat is 73, and for a male in Glasgow, life expectancy 72. Wow. Maybe you may wish to ask me about that later on. And life expectancy you can see for females. COVID, well, here we have a population times 6 that of the UK, and the COVID deaths in Morocco is 276 compared to the figure you can see for the UK. And there's 2 figures there, but I won't go into how we make it very tough to identify the number of deaths in Scotland. So where are the similarities and where are the differences? Morocco is a wonderful country. It's got a great location. It's got an Atlantic coastline, as you can see there. It's got a Mediterranean coastline. It stretches down into the Sahara Desert. So it's got a Mediterranean coastline. It's got a wet and windy Atlantic coastline, and it's got a series of fairly substantial mountain ranges in the north of the country. And once you get over the mountains, as we'll see very shortly, we enter the semi-desert and the desert. If you notice something called the Western Sahara down at the bottom of the map just now, I'll come back to that later on. I first went to Morocco. You can see me as a young boy there, obviously dominating the center of the photograph. I first went there, let me think now, about almost 20 years ago. I was part of an explore group, and the idea was to trek across the mountains of North Morocco and eventually get ourselves fit enough to get to the top of Toubkal. It's 4,000 plus meters high, 14,000 feet high. Morocco, believe it or not, has got ski resorts, which is unusual for what we consider to be a desert country. So why have I been at Morocco so many times since retirement? When I retired, I was asked by a travel company called Rayburn, based in Derby in England, if I would do some consultancy work with the geography trips that they were running, mainly for A-level students, some Scottish higher students, and some university students. And they were developing their geography programs to Iceland, Morocco, and many, many other countries. Although I'm speaking about Morocco tonight, with 20 visits there, I've been to Iceland about 50 times in the last few years as well. So I meet students out in Morocco, and basically I show them the country and show them the fantastic potential of the country for advanced geography studies, a small group of the students there. We fly into Marrakech. Now, Marrakech is quite an exotic location, and it's now advertised very much as a long weekend destination from the UK and from Northern Europe. From London, it's 3 hours and a bit in a plane, and you can land in the exotic city of Marrakech. And what I would call the square here comes utterly alive at night. In Marrakech is where I meet the students, and from there we head south over the high Atlas Mountains and into the desert beyond. The students tend to be in Morocco for 6 or 7, sometimes 8 nights. And although it is a holiday, it nevertheless is very much a sort of themed geographical field study. It involves a fair amount of travel by coach. It involves a fair amount of walking. And for many students, one of the highlights, of course, is the camp. Maybe some people would call it glamping, and you'll see a closer photo of our accommodation shortly. And we most certainly do arrive in style. Beautiful location. It's, I suppose it's surrounded by some mountains, and of course it's surrounded by sand. Not all of the Sahara Desert, of course, is sand. The bulk of it tends to be rocks and stones, but we've got some wonderful sand dunes here where the students tend to go up and just watch the sunset. And the sheer joy and the pleasure of young kids like that, sort of 17, 18-year-old kids, really being taken out of their comfort zone to experience very much a different culture. That's our glamping there, a little bit of luxury in the desert. The students, in fact, tend to sleep 2, 3, 4, 2 a tent. We've got plenty of accommodation to keep ourselves cool in the evenings, and the local guys will prepare our meals and sing songs, and the kids usually join in the singing. And then we just lie back in the sand and stare up at the Milky Way and the sun setting in the sky. So that effectively is the reason I've been there. For many students, and many of the students have travelled extensively, but the idea of a Arabian trip here is to sort of just go beyond the tourist hotspots and try to understand a little bit about the culture, the geography of the country, and I suppose about what it's like to live in a country that is developing. It's a country which has, we'll see in the second half of this presentation, has got a number of serious challenges. The king, King Mohammed VI, now been on, he succeeded his father, who succeeded his father, has got a very difficult job to do. It's an Islamic country. It's not noted for its radical sort of, its radicalism, but nevertheless, the king wishes to move his country very much into the 21st century. He wants the country to be secure. He wants his people to be fed, to be lifted out of poverty, for women to be given increased status in society, but at the same time attract foreign investment, and he's got to balance it with, I suppose, being a true Islamic nation. It's a very difficult thing to do. One of the highlights for the students is we spend a day at a very traditional village. This village, in fact, at one level has not changed in 200 years. The families that live there trace their roots back to 5 or 6 different Berber families that inhabited this part of the Marrakech plain. And although it now has electricity, it still basically, it revolves around the importance of family and religion. So the students spend a day here. So what do? We go, we pull up water from the wells. That's 2 of the students. This is one of the parts of the trip where the students are expected to be very sensitive to the traditional life in this village here. It's only 40 minutes out of Marrakech, but you can see the students there working hard. The well is 15 meters deep. They have to pull the water up. They put it into the little channels, and the sheep and the goats will come down for the water. I'll allude to this later on. The well, when I first went out there, was 10 meters, 18 meters, and when I go back, whenever that will be, the well, in fact, may be 25 meters down. The water table, the level at which you find water in the ground, is dropping. The reason is that the rain is not falling in the mountains, and the underground reserves of water are not filling up. And there's a group absolutely fascinated. So when we go to the village, we tend to split into 2 groups. The boys tend to do this, what you can see there. The boys fill up the water, they distribute it, they collect the sheep. They tend to also collect the fodder for the animals. They will make mud bricks. They will probably build some outbuildings. They'll probably render the walls. They'll probably set the fires for charcoal. They may well be picking some olives off the trees. They may go to the machinery shop and make iron items. And meanwhile, the girls make lunch. And that by itself is quite a statement of what is considered to be boys' work and girls' work. And I'll see more about life in the village in the next few slides and also later on. Of course, Moroccan hospitality or Berber hospitality is, it's obviously well known. Whenever you arrive, you're treated with the tea, the sugary tea, and the ceremony of the tea. Normally some biscuits and some nuts and so on. You see, you're thinking I'm in a holiday here, but I'm not. That, of course, is me hard at work, and that's how the houses are still constructed. The clay is the natural surface of the land, and you simply pull up some water, you add some straw, and you build the walls. You stack them high. So my guide out there for the last 10 years has been a friend called Musin. And in those years, I've seen him and his family and his brothers and his sisters, some getting married, some remaining in the village, some of them going into Marrakech or beyond. So the village still has roughly the same number of people, but its future is probably going now to be measured in maybe another 20 or 30 years. There is no future for this village as a result, I guess, of climate change and also developments elsewhere. The Sahara Desert, well, here it is. It's awesome. The largest desert, obviously, on the planet. And I guess we tend to take more photographs in the desert, in the sand. And wherever you look, wherever you stray away from the little sort of bits of settlement where the people Where there is water, you will find people. Where there is no water, you will find the vast empty spaces. And here we've got a little camel train there, just 3 camels there. And that will be in contrast to later on when I mention some of the camel trains that left Morocco to head south into Timbuktu and Mali, where you may have had 2,000 or 3,000 camels sort of taking the long trek through the Sahara Desert. You leave Marrakech, and when you leave Marrakech, you go on what they call the N9, the National Motorway 9, the road. You'll see the 9 road in a slide or two. A national road. It's one of the few roads that cut across the Atlas Mountains. The Atlas Mountains rise up, as I mentioned, over 4,000 meters, and the passes over which the lorries and the vehicles, all the vehicles, including the coaches, and most of the fuel and food that's required go over these mountain passes. It's a massive barrier on the development of Morocco south of the Atlas Mountains. Mountains are high, frequently covered and blocked with snow in the winter. The king was very keen to identify what modernization meant to his people. He was very keen that all the people, all Moroccans, would be connected to an electricity supply, to a clean water supply, to a sewage system, and also have communications. And of course, it is strange passing over the Atlas Mountains or driving through the Sahara Desert that you tend to get really superb signals on your telephones, even when the last settlement you passed was maybe an hour behind you and the next one is an hour in front of you. Here you have an oasis, and that simply is marked by where water is actually on the surface or just below the surface. It may be fed from a river rising in the mountains, seasonal in nature, or sometimes by the water under the ground coming onto the surface. Yes, the national road, it's quite spectacular, as you can see. A journey may only be, say, 60 kilometers over the mountains, and normally, I suppose, you would consider a national road 60 kilometers, maybe do it in about 40 minutes or so, maybe allow 5 or 6 hours for it if you're lucky. Not everyone is lucky, as you'll see in a moment, but the king has decided that a huge amount of resources required to be spent on improving the infrastructure. And for the last 6 or 7 years, that road that you saw a moment ago is now being converted into a modern dual lane highway. They've been working on it, they've mobilized, I don't know how many thousands of workers. And I have to say, when it's completed, it will be spectacularly magnificent, as good as some of the mountain passes you'll find up in Switzerland. Of course, you can keep account of the number of lorries you pass in ditches. Yes, the CMPF assistance there. Quite a lot of vehicles, in fact, don't quite make it. There are landslips, regular. There can be many avalanches. There can be ice, snow, incredibly poor visibility. So it's so exciting, spectacularly beautiful, but always has an edge to it. I mentioned a few minutes ago about the camel trains. And there is a famous little sketch here, and it's Timbuktu. It's 52 days away by camel. And the place that the camel trains start, well, there are several, but one is Zagora. And I wanted to visit Zagora, and I wanted to follow some of the Timbuktu camel train the first time. The second time I went to Morocco. And from Zagora in the past, you would join up, you would bring your camels, you would bring your, whatever it was you were going to be trading, silver or gold. And then in a large group of people, maybe, as I mentioned, 2,000 camels, several thousand people, you set south for what was a 52-day journey through the Sahara Desert to Timbuktu in the country of Mali. Down at the bottom, you can see a settlement there with a castle on the top of the mountain, and we'll be visiting that place shortly. Of course, Morocco in the 12th, 13th, 14th, all the way through, I guess, to the last century, was quite a hazardous country to pass through. There wasn't a country as such. There were little fiefdoms, there were little sort of personal sort of enclaves. There, you had the bandits, you had the landowners, because you must remember also that the bulk of history, Morocco had a slightly different climate to what we find today. Yes, there was always a Sahara Desert, but the Sahara Desert now is probably 4 or 5 times the size it was then. So to travel across and through Morocco, you needed to band together for your own safety and security. And we're at a settlement called, well, it's quite close to Zagora here. And this settlement here in the valley of the Dra is in the land which they call the land of the 1,000 Kasbahs. And a Kasbah, lovely name, I suppose it's a house, but it's a fortified house, a fortified castle in a sense. So after you've walked your regular sort of 40, 50 kilometers during the day, you need a place for your camels to rest up, get some feed, get some water, and be safe. And they would enter buildings like this, and they'd be safe and secure under the auspices of the particular landowner there. You paid some money for that protection, and then the next day you'd be on the move again. This is a place called Eid Ben Hadou, and it's one of these old settlements that had a pretty spectacular Kasbah here. You can see the modern river there. You can, when I first went to Eid Ben Hadou, to get to the settlement, you could either pay a man a couple of dirham, 10, 20 pence to cross the river in the back of a donkey, or if the river was nice and low, you just went across in the little ford. So this is Eid Ben Hadou, one of the largest and most spectacular of these Kasbahs. It's pretty famous today because not only is it a United Nations sort of heritage centre, it's also the site for many adverts, sort of fashion adverts, and also the site for many, many Hollywood and Bollywood films. Because it's a United Heritage Site, it's meant that huge sums of money can now be spent in making the pathways and the walls secure. When I first went to Eid Ben Hadou 10 years ago, we would arrive and probably there could be maybe one other group, maybe a total 30, 40 people at the site. Today, I guess if you were to arrive at maybe 11 o'clock in the morning, there could be 3,000 or 4,000 people walking along these pathways there. Morocco is open for tourism and is very, very busy. Just a general view, I guess, of the sub-desert landscape there. You can see the mixture of the mountains, the sedimentary rocks and layers, the clusters of little settlements, the national road winding its way through there. And if you also can see the line of electricity pylons and the source of the power, I'll come back to at the end. A very surprising source of income in the desert. Now, where there's water, you can grow crops. So that remains. But this is a film studio. There's a place called Ouarzazate. It's a lovely name, Ouarzazate. I keep repeating it. I'll say it again, Ouarzazate. It's got 3 film studios. And these film studios have outdoor locations, outdoor sets, maybe 3 or 4 kilometers, stretching all around into the desert. There's one, there's another one. And it's been said when Ouarzazate is featuring the latest blockbuster, you're likely to find Tom Cruise strolling down the desert street or whoever. There's some films there. There is an odd one out there. If you're into Joel Wicks, that's a series that quite often features desert landscape. Gladiator, quite a lot of the scenes, and if you remember Gladiator, the prison scene and quite a lot of the scenes. Game of Thrones, which I've never watched, has a number of scenes throughout Morocco. Lawrence of Arabia, Mission Impossible, and of course, the only one which of course was not really shot in Morocco at all is called Casablanca. It was mostly shot in Hollywood. So with more time, I would have asked you to spot the odd one out. Now, we're about 25 minutes into the talk here, and I reckon it was time you had a photograph of myself looking incredibly sort of regal with 8 Ben Haddou in the background, and sitting at the top of that Casbah is the water tower. So let's move on, or move around. And I want to sort of move the theme a little away from the traveling into the desert, but spend a little bit of time talking about Marrakech and the people of Morocco and tell you some of their stories. This is the grand square, El Najema Square. During the day, it's pretty quiet and deserted. In a weekend, normally, and let's say it's Easter weekend, this square comes alive at night. It has the souks, the market stalls, some outside, some inside. You have the stalls of food, and in the foreground of this photograph here, you have an incredible range of people trying to make some money. Of course, if you go away from the square, you very quickly enter the alleyways. Morocco may be short of water in places, and many families may be short of money, but they're not short of motorbikes, I think you can see there. And as you look down from the cafes and the restaurants overlooking the square, you just see life unfolding. People in the move, people everywhere. The streets particularly come alive at night, as Moroccans, in fact, enjoy the streets and the parks. In the square, yes, you can get the henna in your hands. You can, and I always manage to utterly resist, cuddling these monkeys. And if you have a problem with toothache, Do not worry. You can get an instant appointment. And this fellow here does extractions, and at the same time, he can actually stick in a little implant for you and indeed give you a full set of dentures. And it will cost you less than £10. So if you're looking for a place to go, you know, well, there you are. There you go. Of course, the young folk that I take there, they're challenged. They're challenged in every way. And this is a fairly typical butcher shop here. The meat is obviously halal meal here. The concept of vegetarianism and veganism hasn't really particularly caught on in Morocco yet. So as we stop for our lunch on the mountains, we have to go through the butcher shop, and usually we try to step over a sheep's head or various other bits. Social distancing in Marrakech here. Yeah, remember they've only had about 200 deaths in the last couple of months. I'll say more about what they have done to keep the death rate down. And in the middle of an alleyway such as that, you could find a couple of little scooters coming down and an old man pulling an iron trolley. On the fringes, you will find where there's a bit more space. Here is pottery, a pottery shop out here. The clay is taken from the river valley. It's obviously molded and shaped into the plates, the tagine bowls, and some sold to the visiting tourists, but mostly taken to Marrakech. And from such a basic workshop as that, you can get these quite beautiful plates. These plates are very expensive to the Western market, and plates like that will easily cost, well, £15 out there is a lot of money in Morocco, but they really are quite beautiful. Morocco is not short of sandals. We have pink ones, we have magenta ones, we have pistachio ones, we have black sandals. We've got them in every size imaginable. And we've got little tagine pots of all shapes and sizes. Marrakech is an ancient city. It's a centre of learning, religion, market centre, and it's all of those things plus a tourist centre today. Go to Marrakech for a long weekend if you can. And within this hustle and the bustle of the city, there's lots for you to do as a tourist. A day trip to the mountains, a day trip to the coast, and even a couple of hours in a beautiful urban garden within the city here. It was a house of Yves Saint Laurent, and when he left, his family bequeathed it to the people of Marrakech. It's an area of calm and beauty. I just sort of took a sneaky photograph of a young girl there modelling for an advert. It's a cultured country. Marrakech is noted for its music. It is noted for its arts and its wall murals. So it's a complex country. Don't just assume that it's a country of poverty and sort of lack of education. Like many developing countries, it's got that width. So the murals there are fascinating and interesting. But it challenges you. You're traveling across towards the Atlantic here, and you can see goats climbing the trees. And that really is something that you don't expect. These are argan trees, and these are the goats that like the argan mountains, the argan nuts. The next few photos show the people. If you want to take photographs of people in Morocco, you have to pay money. And you can understand why photographs like this, you'll probably want a couple of pounds to get a photograph but you just give them 10 dirham and run away. You've got your photograph for about 60 or 70 pence. Now, Moroccan people, it's a young population. 40% of the population, 15 and under. So it's a young population. There are relatively few older people in the mountains, in Morocco. And there is a difference in wealth between the people in the cities and the rural areas, and the difference in wealth between people. The further you are away from the cities, then the tougher life will be. These ladies there are at a women's cooperative where the argan nuts are brought, they're cracked open, and in fact, they're then mashed, and you get the argan paste and the argan oil. Some of the paste will be used for cosmetics, some of it will be used obviously as a food, and you also get the oils for cooking. And this is one of the apothecary shops here, where the guy there is trying to sell the argan oil to some of my students there. Argan oil in this country is very pricey to buy. It's a very adaptable and a high quality product. Some more people. Traveling around the country, you see this is the typical means of travel outside the big city. It's the donkey, usually the woman on the donkey, collecting the alfalfa, the food, or indeed the herbs to be used that night in cooking. This farmer here was 44, and he was a fantastic man. He had 6 children, and he started becoming a father, fairly young man. But 2 of his children have already left this rural area. And not only have they left the area, but they've left the country. They're working as guest workers in Spain. So the young and dynamic can't really cope with the rural poverty still found in places. This man here was one of the cameleers. This man owned 3 camels, and he was a rich by Moroccan sort of standards. If you want to know the price of a camel, a good camel could cost you £5,000, and they're expensive to keep. A good camel requires feed of about £10 a day. And bear in mind that a labourer may only make £20 in a week. So he was a cameleer. He in fact owned, and to use one of his camels for a day, he charges quite a lot of money, I have to say. Here we have a nomad farmer here, and this is such a traditional way of life here. This man, in fact, and it's sometimes his wife, will wander. They may not have a fixed home. Their home may move 3 or 4 times a year as their sheep or their goats seek out some pasture. That man there, he may never have been in Marrakech. He may never have seen a city. We've got a sort of lady on the top right there. And when we spoke with her, she was, I think, 30, and she had a 15-year-old daughter. And that's quite challenging when you've got students with you who are maybe only 17, and they start to put in sort of a Western perspective on the traditional way of life. Very classic photograph of a Berber here, Berber women. You can see the traditional henna paintings here. We stop at this, I stop at this small settlement here just before we do our camel trek into the desert. And this man here, he obviously enjoys it when a coach turns up and maybe 15 or 20 students wish to buy one of the headgear, because you've got to look the part. There's no point just going on a camel. You need to get your photograph taken on a camel, and the photograph has, if you're going to send it back home, you have to look the part. And every time I go, he gives me the full paraphernalia here. So if any of you are going to fancy dress as a Berber desert person, let me know. I've got all the gear for you. This man here greets us at one of the sites, and just look at him. One day I think he's not going to be there. He's a fair old age. He could even be the same age as Ian Shaw. So I'm always delighted to see him. And he sees the people coming up the steps, and he starts strumming on that mandolin type musical instrument, and his voice starts to boom across the landscape, and it's absolutely awful. But he makes a nice living out of it. Lovely man. I always give him a little tip there. It's another man up in the mountains here, and he sells tangerines there. You actually can buy a bin bag of tangerines in season for about £1. And I encourage the youngsters also to buy jewellery from him. This is a man that's been working in a mountain cafe since he was 12. And he's now, I don't know what age he is. He works in the cafe there, and he doesn't speak a word of English. But again, I may not have been there for many months, and it's another face to look out for. Mohammed, our coach driver. Another Mohammed, who's the boy who helps the coach driver. Basically counts us off, counts us on. It's a job for life. He looks after the bags and the baggage, and he looks after us. Street corner style. You may recognize this as a leather factory in a Moroccan city. It's in Marrakech again. Beautiful colours, but it's one of the hardest, most dangerous jobs ever. So you're getting a flavour of the country here and the people within it. Go across to the Mediterranean, so go across to the Atlantic, and there's a settlement here called Eshweri, and you can see that here is a fishing port. You've got the big fishing boats in the background and the small boats that just go out overnight. Beautiful colours, beautiful city, Eshweri. If you ever get the chance, please take a day trip from Marrakech. You have to look twice at that photograph before you can see and realise that you're looking at another mural there. I loved that photograph, and I took one looking the other way as well. Lovely images just to challenge you. Now, I don't have that far to go now, Ian's thinking, thank goodness. See, Marrakech is now being built as a conference centre, and many conferences are going there. When we were there was a conference of doctors, and there's a climate change one. So the delegates obviously have their days packed full. If they've got a few days off, they will be taken to the Atlantic, they may be taken up over the mountains. There are shopping malls and there are luxury hotels, all to be found. And the king wants his country to be viewed as a safe country, and he wants access to dollars and euros. He's not so bothered about the British pound, but it's dollars and euros. So what are the problems and the challenges? Climate change. The rainfall is dropping. And once you get over the mountains, the rain levels are dropping and the reliability just has disappeared. The rivers are drying up. Now this settlement where the ladies are washing the clothes there, they now have electricity. And in fact, many of the ladies there will have washing machines in their house. But you see, they still prefer traditionally to come down to the river to wash their clothes, because they will live in a compound in the village just with family members, and they won't meet other women, other ladies and children from other families. So they still come down to the rivers, and the river levels are getting lower. This marks a well below the ground. And again, it's getting deeper and deeper. And in many areas, they can't bring the water up now and use it because it's too salty and brackish. And although the sheep may be able to drink it for a few more years, it's too salty for humans. Remember I mentioned the Western Sahara? About 20 years ago, this huge area south of Morocco was virtually, no one particularly claimed it. The Spanish thought it was theirs, but the king at that time wanted to claim it. So he got 100,000 Moroccan people to walk into the Western Sahara Desert, and they claimed it as part of Morocco. That's certainly how you can double the size of your landscape. If you look here, you may wonder why I've got a photo here of a hoodie. I met a group out there, and I met them out there, but they didn't come through customs, they didn't come through passport control. And then I heard that they had been impounded because they were wearing, the whole group had been kept behind by customs people, by passport control. They were wearing a hoodie, and the hoodie had the school name on the front, and it had a map of Morocco. But the map of Morocco was only the bit of Morocco and not the Western Sahara. And the passport control customs people took exception to this and said, you can't come into the country with an offensive map. And of course, they were told to take their tops off, but many of the kids didn't have anything on below the top, so they had to get their luggage. So it took them about an hour and a half to get into Morocco. So welcome to Morocco. By the way, you're all arrested. Another problem or challenge. It's a very religious country. There's the biggest mosque in Marrakech there. The area inside and outside can take 10,000 worshippers. If you know a lot about Islamic religion, it is a religion that promotes peace. And there are five pillars of Islam, and peace and helping one another are some of the pillars of Islam. So again, don't confuse it with the radicalism. However, 9 years ago, there was a terrorist incident in the city in Marrakech there, where someone blew up the Organa Cafe. I had actually been in that cafe about a week before, and it was used by tourists and local people. And it was identified as a deranged madman set off. They captured him, they put him on trial, and they passed sentence, and they executed him in 2.5 days. So no messing about with Moroccan justice. And there is terrorism in the north of the country, particularly in Casablanca and Rabat, the capital. And Moroccan terrorists, in fact, have been responsible for, amongst other incidents, Barcelona. And moving on very quickly, just 2 or 3 more minutes here. The Moroccan desert is rich in resources, from silver to iron ore to nickel to huge numbers of as yet deposits that have not been quarried or mined. And what was happening here was that Rio Tinto Zinc had bought the rights to develop silver from a mountain. But the nature of the exploitation meant a lot of water had to be used to flush out the debris that wasn't required. And they bought and used the water that they had, and it meant that 5 villages in the whole area ended up with no water. And this was the local people here trying to protest, but they can't take on the government and Rio Tinto zinc, because what's more important, the benefit to the nation or individuals, and this is one of these silver mines there. Exploitation for fossils, clearing mountains for the rich European markets. Again, we need the trade. This is another disturbing element in modern Morocco, and that is sex tourism. Marrakech is reckoned to be the #2 sex tourism site in the world after Bangkok here. Really sleazy side to it, which normally you'll never see. The rich tourists come to play golf. And of course, they want the hotels and the manicured lawns and the swimming pools. But of course, the water is at the expense of the local farmers. The economy was booming, but is marked by elements of corruption. There is rural poverty. There is an educational system that is struggling, an education system that still, well, it's compulsory for girls up to 15, but very few girls in the rural areas will be in school after the age of 11 or 12. There is exploitation throughout the country in the metalwork factories that you see there, and you'll see 11 and 12-year-old boys working in that setting. The country has got one of the most modern power stations you'll find anywhere, and this is one of the solar panel power stations in Morocco. And they reckon that the Sahara Desert could power the whole world once we work out how we actually run a cable from the Sahara Desert up to Shetland. But it's a massive development. It's all European money, and it's mainly German technology. There's the square. A few days ago, I took this from the internet, and that's the impact of COVID-19. There's the police making sure that people don't go outside. I love Morocco. I love the people. I'm concerned about the challenges, and the wealth is coming, but it's not yet being shared by all. And finally, there I am, the end of a long working trip to Morocco. Thank you.